And I want to thank everyone for participating today, all of you out in the field who are trying this new webinar format that we have called Online Conversations with Practitioners. I also want to thank our practitioners, Nicole, Ashley, and Joe Dragone, as well as our moderator, Jeff Olefson. Our topic today is building positive relationships. In the about 25 years that I've been involved with school finance and management, I would say that building positive relationships is one of the most significant abilities that goes across so many aspects of the profession. Often I will tell people, collaborate, collaborate, collaborate. You almost never can do enough. But what about the quality of that collaboration? That's what we're here to discuss today. Are there things that you can do to build positive and lasting relationships that will help you accomplish your mission? So we'd like to that you let us know your reactions after this. Is it generally positive, generally negative, what you liked, what you disliked, and other topics you would like to include? And bear in mind that there may be issues that come up during the year that are troubling for school districts, and school districts are grappling with them, and we may decide to have an online conversation about that event or that topic that we can't even identify right now. But let us know what you think. I'm going to introduce our moderator who will start us off, but before I do, let me just mention that we have a few other upcoming events. We have a certified risk management workshop, December 10th and 11th is part 1. Part 2 is March 10th and 11th. We have a budget workshop, December 16th, everything you ever needed to know about school district budgeting. And then we have an update on the Smart Schools Bond Act and a management services update with Christina Coughlin on January 12th. Okay, so our moderator today is Jeff Olefson. Jeff is president of Staff Development Associates, and he's hosted numerous webinars and made presentations at many NYSASBO conferences. And I got to say that he has the gift for simultaneously communicating with presenters and the audience. So I would really encourage you to contribute to this conversation. And Jeff will explain how you can do that. So Let me now just turn it over to Jeff. Jeff?
Okay, sounds great. We still have some people coming in, so I may have to stop in the middle. So I just want to give you a little introduction to the application that you're using, which is Join Me, because it's been fairly quiet, but at some point I may need to mute because we do tend to get people put someone on hold, I get their on hold music, etc. So lots of times people put comments in the chat box, so I want to share how you do this. So what you're going to see is on top of your screen, you'll see these icons. The one you want to look at is the one that looks like a cartoon bubble, and you want to select that now. When you select that, you're going to get a box that looks like this that's going to drop down. By the way, you can move that to anywhere you want on your screen if it's an inconvenient spot. And the place where you're going to type is here in this middle area. And the way we've set the default is that anything you type is seen by everyone. So what I'd like you now to do is to put in your name. You can just put in your first name and you know what district you're from. Okay? So why don't you do that now? And the reason we do that is we have a list of who signed up, but I think people like to see who else is participating and from what areas of the state. Okay, so I always like to do this twice just to give you a little quiz question, kind of keep it fun. So and we'll do that at all of our sessions. We'll have some sort of a quiz question. So here's the question of this session. Which of the following is not a county in New York State? Wyoming, Boone, Lewis, or Orleans County? Oh, we have some smart people. I think everybody got it right. Okay, terrific. And the answer happens to be Boone County. There is no Boone County in New York State. Okay.
Wyoming, I like Wyoming.
There you go. So again, we'll get started in a minute. I'm just going to do a couple of opening comments, and then I'm going to turn it over to our, to your colleagues with some questions that we've prepared. So here's just some general thoughts on the topic. Successful leaders recognize that it's important to build relationships, both internal and external relationships. And these are going to likely enhance your success. That it's almost impossible in this world and in the complicated roles you play to know the answers to all the questions. So the key to success is to know who to go to. And oftentimes the most successful people in the field are successful because they've cultivated the relationships with people who have specialized knowledge, not to mention the importance of cultivating relationships within your district that are going to enhance your ability to get along and work together with people. So one of the key things is that you're not going to be able to build relationships chained to your desk, that you're going to need to get out. And one of the things I like to say is, it's all well and good to talk about this in theory. The reality is that you have jobs with very full plates and lots of demands. And so it's quite easy to become buried in that and never get out to those meetings or get out to those events, like, for example, taking credit for the ribbon cutting for something that you in the business office helped to make happen. Because there's always going to be something to do in the office. And so if you're not getting out of the office, you're not going to be able to build relationships. And that relationships are not going to appear on your to-do list. And that's the challenge. Certain things are by nature going to be on your to-do list. So you're going to need to they're not going to arrive organically. You're going to have to make the decision to put these things on your to-do list. And this kind of brings to kind of an interesting concept. I don't know whether any of you are familiar with Stephen Covey's work, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. But one of the things that Covey talks about a lot in his work is this notion of the difference between important and urgent. And what he says is that the natural default is for us to do the things that are urgent and not always to do the things that are important. So a lot of the cultivating relationships things, while they are important, I would almost say vital to your career, they're not they're not going to happen unless you proactively make a decision to do that. And that's why, the most successful people who build relationships actually make it a goal and have a plan. And the way I like to think of it is that relationships are like money in the bank. You don't get dividends right away, but if you don't build these critical relationships, you're really putting yourself at risk. You ignore them at your peril. And so that's kind of just my, general setup. And so, Deborah, why don't you introduce our, our two panelists for today?
Absolutely. Thank you, Jeff. Our practitioners today are Nicole Ashley, who is Director of Financial Affairs at St. Lawrence Lewis BOCES. Nicole has made a point of working on this topic of building positive relationships in her region, both within her BOCES business office and with her the school districts in her area. And she talks to them a lot about positioning yourself for success in your school district. Joe Dragone is Assistant Superintendent for Business at Rosalind Public Schools. He took over in 2006, which must have been a very low time for this district that had just come out of a lot of trouble, financial trouble and fraud trouble. And so now he has 10 years of building relationships with the community, the staff, the parents, to kind of repair that district. So I think you'll have some wonderful insights as well. So now let me turn it back to Jeff, and we will begin.
Okay, sounds great. All right, so we're going to ask the same questions to both panelists, but what we'll try to do is switch order. So this time we're really going to go right to left. And so I'm going to actually ask Nicole first. When you arrived in your current position, what were some of the essential relationships that you felt that you needed to cultivate? And what are some of the first steps that you undertook to do that?
Well, one of the first things I noticed when I started at BOCES was that the structure is very different from what I was used to out in a component district. I was used to a small rural school, 1 or 2 buildings. Now, we have 3 tech centers here at BOCES spread throughout the county. At the time, we had 4 other administrative buildings throughout the county. So I had to really put some thought into who are some of the key players I needed to reach out to and how was I going to do that given the location. And when I say key players, I really think for me it's the administration here at BOCES, the other administrators that I really needed to reach out to. I needed to become part of their team because we really needed to work on things together. I was lucky that we already had administrative council meetings set up. Our district superintendent felt that it was important to get us all together throughout the year. So that was one way I was able to connect with them. But another way that I think really helped was I would do ride-alongs with our director of facilities, and we would go out to a tech center, and the first thing that we would do was stop into the principal's office. We would just kind of chat with the principal, see how things are going, but it was a good opportunity to just kind of get to know them and to actually put out any fires before they start. So if there were any issues going on in the building, they were able to convey that to us. We were able to walk around the building together. And it formed, I think, a pretty decent relationship. The other thing that I try to do is opening day when school starts, I go out with the district superintendent and the assistant superintendent to the tech centers so that we're visible to the staff, that we're seeing the students on their first day. Besides the administration, there's other layers here. Obviously the staff in my division is another area that I needed to cultivate relationships with. And again, they're at different locations. So when I'm supervising people, a lot of times I go out and visit them. Sometimes I have staff meetings over here. I think one of the things I'm going to really try to do is use more of this web conferencing to actually get us all together. That way we're not traveling as much, we're not spending as much time on the road, but we're able to connect and to build some better relationships there. And then I think probably the third group that I really needed to reach out to was the component school districts themselves, the superintendents and the business managers. And that's an ongoing relationship that we're trying to build. We've had some regional business manager meetings. I'm hoping to pick that up again and do more of that. Our district superintendent does visit each component district once a year, and I often visit with him if there is time. And we do some road shows when our administrative budget comes out in the spring, and with the district superintendent, maybe the assistant superintendent, we go to each of the board meetings and we, present the administrative budget. We answer questions about BOCES. We just kind of get to know the board members, the superintendent, the business managers, all of those who are at the component districts.
Okay, sounds good. I had a question for you, Nicole.
Sure.
The meetings where you're doing the travel arounds, was that something you just did when you first started, or are you continuing that on an ongoing basis?
Nope, we're continuing it. A lot of times now it's when there's an issue, and when the director of facilities wants to show me something that's going to cost money. But I do try to make an attempt to get out there and see the tech center, so that because I also have custodial staff that are there, so I like to get to know them as well. So not only is it cultivating the relationship with the administrator, it's also reaching out to some of the support staff too.
Okay, sounds great. Thank you, Nicole. Joe, you want to take up on the same question? What were some of when you first arrived in Rosalind, what were some of the essential relationships that you felt you needed to cultivate, and what were some of the first steps you did to undertake that?
Interestingly, in Rosalind, as many of you know, there was a complete breach of trust between the community and the school district. There were broken relationships between the Board of Education and administration, between the administration and the community. So my first task was to have people be able to get to trust what we were doing again. There was no trust. You can't imagine what it's like to be in a district where you say, just trust us, and nobody can believe that that's appropriate. So I was the 6th business official in Rosalind in the space of 3 years. There were a bunch of interims that went through, and I felt that it was really important that we add some stability to the situation here. I had actually come here as a retiree, working as an interim, and I actually left retirement. I unretired in order to stay here because it was obvious to me that they could not stand to go through another set of rotating interims. One of the things that I did that really has helped me tremendously in terms of building relationships with the community is I actually serve as the Voice of Rosalind, I'm nicknamed, because somebody had to make the announcements when schools were closed, when schools were delayed due to snowstorms. When Sandy happened, we had announcements going out every morning as to what the status of power was, whether or not schools were going to be open. So I am the person who makes some people call them the Connect Ed calls, the Blackboard Connect calls, school messenger calls, and that has really helped me to become an auditory, if not a visual, representation of the school district. That's been a lot of fun for me in the past few years.
Okay, sounds good. Any things that you did to cultivate relationships with your own staff or team in the business office?
Yeah, for a long time, one of the things that I did was to actually have a monthly meeting of the business staff in which we tried to focus on personal stuff, not just business stuff, like who had a new grandchild, whose daughter got married, etc. And it helped us to become more of a family as opposed to the business office staff, which, of course, that staff was the focus of the scandal. So it was difficult for them to get out from under that vision that people had of them. And hopefully that has built a team approach to events in Rosalind.
Okay, sounds great. Thank you. So you get the second question, and since we're going the opposite order, okay, what are some of the challenges or risks when you started out? This is for Joe. And how can they be avoided? And in particular, just to kind of as a general thing, sometimes SBOs are a little concerned about being too front and center because of how their superintendent may feel about that. So maybe you can share a little bit of your experiences around that question.
Sure. This actually was a little bit easier for me. I've been in the business now for almost 48 years, having served as a building principal, assistant principal, director of special education, etc. Before I became an assistant superintendent, and I was responsible for personnel at one point, for business all along. So I have actually observed or been in the middle of a number of pitfalls that happen in school districts. And as a result, that has given me a lot of street cred, I guess, is the way you would call it. When I make an announcement to building principals, they know that I've been there, done that. It's a little bit easier for me to say no than it might be for other business officials who don't have to live with a business official saying no to them. That was very helpful in my career. I am sure that business officials can develop that sense of background and respect by making themselves more visible in the school district, by attending concerts and sporting events and PTA meetings and staff convocations retirement parties, you name it, so that people get to see them as another human being with just specialized skills and a special audience. I keep telling my kids when they ask me what I do, I keep telling them I'm a teacher. I just have a different audience. It's parents and taxpayers, and a different medium. It's the budget that I'm teaching people about, and that really helps people to understand what I see my role as a facilitator, making a financial plan that makes it possible for everybody else to do their job.
And if I could just jump in on that, this is Deborah.
Yeah.
Is that part of building positive relationships, Joe, that ability to educate and to be a teacher? Isn't that part of the role that makes for positive relationships?
Yes, I think, Deborah, that all business officials, even if they come from a background of accounting, finance, etc., have to realize that the milieu that they work in is an educational one, that our goal is educating people. Teachers educate children. Administrators educate the community. And I think that that's really important to keep in mind. Yes, we have different media that we use, and we have different audience, but I really think it's important that business officials look at themselves as teachers, just in a different environment.
Thank you, Joe. I had one more quick one for you. I'm loading you on today. When you started your first job, because obviously they're, just like in the superintendency, it's a little different when you've had years of experience and reputation. But when you were on your first job, what were some of the first steps that you did to kind of establish yourself? I know you talked about how important it is to establish yourself so that you can be the person who, in some cases, has to explain why we can't do something or why we can. What were some of the things you did? Maybe you can talk about maybe your first experience a little bit.
Sure. My first experience, going all the way back to when I became a teacher in 1969, I went back to teach at the high school that I had graduated from. The biggest challenge I had was calling my physical education teacher George instead of Mr. Faulkner. That was the kind of experience that I had for a number of years there. One of the things that I did in order to get involved in the life of the organization was I became a class advisor, advising the class of 1974, and got as involved as I could in the community. We developed a group called Budget Buddies, where we went out to convince people to vote for the budget. I got involved in the life of the community as much as I possibly could. And I think I've carried that experience into every first job that I've had. I've only had the good fortune of working in 4 districts, from very small Nassau County districts to reasonably large Suffolk County districts. So that has given me the opportunity to develop some really positive relationships over the space of those years.
Okay, thank you, Joe. All right, and Nicole, you're up. So what are some of the challenges or risks when you started out, and how can they be avoided? I know that before you were at BOCES, you mentioned you were in a small rural district.
Yeah, I was actually in a few rural districts before. I started at BOCES, then went to districts and came back. And I think the challenges with each of the positions, but certainly when I was starting out, was learning how to communicate to the key stakeholders, both good news, but also, unfortunately, bad news, which is what we seem to deliver most of the time, when there's budget cuts or tax increases. So for me, it was very important to talk with the superintendent and clarify how they wanted me to handle certain situations, like what types of issues did they want me to inform them of before I act? What sorts of issues were they okay that I act on but inform them after? And maybe there were just some issues they just wanted me to handle, and not involve them. I also needed to clarify with them how do they want me to interact with other groups, if it's outside groups, other administrations, board members. I mean, there were times when I had board members calling me at home, and so it puts you in a difficult spot because, you know, you really want to make the superintendent look good. You report to the superintendent, you know, you have a board member calling you at home, so you really have to have a good enough relationship with the superintendent to learn how to handle those situations.
So I think that's a really key point, that you have to make sure that there's an alignment between the expectation of your superintendent in your role and what you may envision. And because you may have different superintendents who have different views on that. And, you know, if you remember when I came up to your area, that was one of the questions that people addressed is, how will my superintendent feel about me being front and center? You know,
Yep.
It's important to clarify the role. Anything else that you found in your, you know, again, maybe we get the benefit of having someone with both kinds of experience, both the BOCES experience and the small rural district. Anything you want to share about your small rural experience in terms of challenges before we ask you the same question about BOCES?
Yeah, I think some of the challenge there is getting to know the community members and forming a relationship with them. You know, one of the districts I did live in the community, so that was easier. You know, I knew most of the people, but the other districts I did not. So, you know, getting out, whether, like Joe had mentioned, going to sporting events or some of the community events, I think that was somewhat of a challenge is getting to know some of the community members and getting to form a relationship with them so they learn to trust you and value your opinion or your comments when you're talking about certain issues.
So I have another question for you. You know, again, before you were in your role in BOCES, what kinds of things did you do to cultivate relationships with other business officials in your area?
I was fortunate that I started with a cooperative business office, so there were other business managers in that office with me, so that was an easier one to connect with. Also, our supervisor had started the regional business manager meetings, and I think probably the thing that was most beneficial was to take advantage of some of these types of trainings with the New York State ASBO and go to Albany or go to some of the events where you could actually meet people from different areas of the state who might be, you know, in a different area but in similar situations. They're in a small rural school district like I was. So I think that was a big benefit as well.
Okay, sounds good. So now the same question at BOCES. What were some of the challenges and risks when you started out, you know, and how can they be avoided?
Again, I think it's still communicating. And here it's even a little bit more difficult because we have our own layers, you know, our administrators, our staff, our board, but then we also have the component district layers. So it becomes challenging in knowing, you know, what is my role, what is the superintendent's role, what does he expect of me. Unfortunately, our biggest challenge has been, you know, explaining our administrative budget increase and why it's going up each year because of the retiree health benefits. So that's where the superintendent and I really, you know, try to go out. We give out information. We go out and meet with the boards. We really just try to cultivate some relationships so they feel comfortable, whether it's the superintendent or a board member calling me, and I can explain to them what, you know, why are there increases in that line of their budget.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
So I have a question for you, Nicole. Why is the administrative budget increasing so much from BOCES?
It's all of our retiree health costs.
Nicole, I'm kidding. Relax.
I know. But I would like you to talk to your legislatures and get that fixed.
Yeah. We all are our role.
Nicole makes a great point. If I could pick up a thread that she started when she talks about relationships with board members, business officials, assistant superintendents for business manager, whatever our title is, we are often called upon by the Board of Education or individual board members to answer questions. And I think a real key positive relationship needs to be established with the superintendent as to how those questions get handled. And one of the practices that I try to do in public, when I'm in the Board of Education meeting in public, is when I get asked a question by a board member or a member of the community, my first reaction is to turn to the superintendent and wait for him to say, go ahead, Joe, or just nod at me, or answer it himself, or for him to say, no, that's not an appropriate question for right now. The more difficult ones are when a board member calls knowing that you have the expertise and asks a question over the phone that really needs to be answered to the entire board and not just to that individual board member. So I've developed the practice. Thank you. That was probably me because the front doorbell rang.
Oh, I didn't realize that was your doorbell. Okay.
It was the doorbell. Yeah. So
the muting wouldn't help. All right, no problem. Thanks.
So I wait. When I get a call like that from a board member, my first reaction is to say, that's a really great question, and I need some time to get you an answer. Then I go to the superintendent, tell him the question that was asked, give him the answer, and let him send it to the entire board. It keeps the relationship with the board members positive by telling them how smart they are and what a wonderful question it is. And it keeps the relationship with the superintendent positive by telling him, look, you're in charge. I know I could answer this question, but this is really your board to deal with.
I think that's so critically important. As you know, Joe, I do a lot of board development, and one of the things that comes up in a lot of our discussions is the interaction between central office team members and board members and how that should work. And there are a lot of factors that might be different in different districts. For example, if a district had a board that was fairly cohesive and they have a superintendent that's been around for a while, a lot of them would say just contact the central office administrators. If you have a board that's more divided, or you have a new superintendent that wants to make sure that he or she is kind of not out of the loop, they might prefer that things get directed through the requests come through the superintendent's office. In any case, if you work as a team, it's going to be handled one way or another. But I think it's important to renew that whenever you have a new superintendent or a change in circumstance. So what might have been an okay practice under one circumstance might be completely different if you have a brand new person or a new relationship with the board. I don't know if you want to speak a little bit more about that, because that can change over time, and we should always renew those when we have a new leader.
Well, it's really interesting because when I started here in Roslyn, the superintendent was a man named Jerry Dempsey. He was an interim. We have since been through two other superintendents, and we're transitioning to a new superintendent next year. Jerry Dempsey came back to be the interim superintendent for this year again. And I'm sure that Jerry would say to you, as I am going to say now, what a different place this is in 9 years. 9 years ago, the only focus was how many signatures can we get on the head of a pin before we release a check. That was it. It was control, control, control. It was finance. It was law. It was, you name it. It had nothing to do with instruction. Now the focus is how many iPads can we put in the hands of kids? And we started to move away from the focus on the finance and the control issue. So therefore, the questions that we're getting from the board are different now. Very different environment now than it was 9 years ago. So you're absolutely right. The environment changes all the time. I'm very happy for it because it means that I have less questions to answer.
Mm-hmm. So before we go on to any more questions from me, maybe we want to open it up to our participants, see if they have any questions they might want to ask our panelists. And at this point, I think the line is closed, so probably the best thing to do is to type them. But I can open the line up again. Maybe I'll open the line up. I'm working on it.
While you're doing that, Jeff, if I could just offer, Nicole has talked about her regional associates. We are so fortunate in Nassau County that within the space of a few square miles, we have 56 school districts. So
go ahead, I got it.
We have a Nassau chapter meeting. 56 different school districts can send their business officials to the chapter meeting, and it makes for great dialogue. We have 30 or 40 show up at a time for our monthly meetings. I think it's a wonderful opportunity for business, even if they have to do it remotely, for business officials to get together and share their concerns with each other. Suffolk County was a little bit more difficult because it's a little bit bigger. Eastern Suffolk is a very vast school with a good number of school districts, something like, I think about the same number of school districts, but spread over hundreds of square miles. And I'm sure that that's the case throughout most of New York State.
That's true. So do we have any questions from any of our participants? The line is open. I guess not. All right. Okay. So this next question's for Nicole first. Okay. Although I think this is supposed to be a Joe question next, but I'm going to give it to you, Nicole, anyway.
Okay.
While relationships outside of your office are very important, what can you share about the things you're doing to build strong relationships within the business office? And I know both of you have spoken about that a little bit already, but maybe you can elaborate a little bit more about what you do.
Sure, yeah. I was very fortunate when I started here that the business office staff, they get along great, and it's really an ideal situation for me. And I'm not just saying that because I think they might be on the call. It is, I think, unique that they get along so well. But I think part of it is they connect as a team a lot. They do luncheons throughout the year. They do birthday celebrations. They fundraise together. So we've kept that going because I know at any point in time relationships can unravel if you don't pay attention to them. Another thing I've started to do is do an annual planning meeting with them. So I get them involved in goal setting and in the process of what are we going to accomplish this year. I've had some staff members who have been here for decades, so they don't get in a rut. I want them to kind of think about how can we implement new things, how can we make some changes and motivate them. So, I think that has worked. They feel part of the process, so it's easier to initiate some of these changes when they do feel part of it. The other thing is we try to do some professional development together. Sometimes a car ride to a workshop, you get to learn a little bit more about people. You get to form some bonding with them. So we do try to take advantage of that if possible too.
Sounds good. Joe, I know you mentioned about your meetings together with people that were to kind of celebrate events in people's lives. Anything else you've done?
Yeah, one of the things that I've done is to invite the business office staff to lunch and learn webinars that you have run, Jeff, where they get trained in skills like Excel, which they use in their daily lives, but nobody takes the time to train them in how to do it. I've also taught in the adult education classes and invited members of my staff to actually come to the adult ed class so they could learn more about the tools like Excel and Microsoft Word that they use on a daily basis. I think that just like we try to provide professional development for teachers, it's critically important that we recognize that business office staff members need to be developed as well. The better they are at doing their jobs, the better Nicole and I look as administrators. And I recognize that critically, that their success is mine, and their failures are mine too. But to make them more successful, providing them with some staff development is really critical.
Joe, well, I want to thank you for the plug for the Lunch and Learn. I want to also point out that you participated with them in these sessions, and I think that's very important. And that is correct, right? You didn't just say it.
Yes, it is. I did participate with them because, tell you the truth, there's always something we can learn. Quite frankly, Jeff, not to give you more of a plug, but I learned things from sitting through that workshop with you that I never knew before.
So, well, I appreciate that, Joe, but this is starting to sound too mutual admiration. Let's move on to our next question. No, but seriously, as somebody who is
talk about all the critical things that I have to say about you, Jeff?
We'll leave those for later. Why don't we do those after, when we're not recording? What I was going to say, Joe, is, the key point is I see a lot of times staff go out to, well, both you and Nicole made this point. We do have a lot of professional development opportunities for people, and a lot of them are through New York State ASBO. But I think it really makes a difference when the boss comes along. So that it's not simply, okay, you folks go, we're bringing someone in, or you folks go, they're having something, but actually going with your team. Even if you don't learn anything, just because of the car ride experience and also because the support you're giving by being with them as a team. I think that's really important. And certainly that, to make a parallel, I know that a number of superintendents will attend the training that New York State School Boards does for school board members. They'll go along with their school board members. And so I think the same is just a good bit of advice. It's not enough to simply set up training for your staff. You have to be involved with them. And it depending on the nature of the training, sometimes it's better if you're not there the whole time, so they feel free. But I think supporting it is more than simply this is going on somewhere. They have to be with them.
I agree,
really
Jeff. We have a practice here of sending every year to the school business management workshop 3 people. It's always my assistant and one person from payroll and one person from and the district clerk. We invite all 3 of them to attend as a group each school business management workshop. I usually go up for one day to teach a class there, but it's a wonderful opportunity for us to have people exposed to similar people in the profession. It is the school business management workshop, for those who are listening who have never been there, is an outstanding conference. It really is so well run. And
since you can plug it, when does that take place?
This year was November, right, Deborah?
Oh, I think Deborah had to leave.
Oh, yeah. Deborah had to leave, yes. I think it was November this year. It happens in the fall every year.
Okay. Sounds good. Okay, so on to our last question before we wrap up. Okay. You're both seasoned professionals. Thinking back to when you first began your career as an SBO, can you think of any opportunities that you maybe missed, or things you would have done differently with the hindsight of your years of experience? Joe, first?
Yeah, sure. That's a great question to throw to me first. There are probably a lot of things that I would have done differently with the benefit of hindsight now. I was rather eager to make changes in my first assistant superintendency. I think I probably could have taken a little more time and gotten the lay of the land a little better before I jumped in with both feet. Other than that, I really can't think of anything I would do differently because it really has been a wonderful ride.
Okay. How about Nicole?
Yeah, when I look back, it seems like all I really focused on was delivering bad news. I think in hindsight, I would spend a little bit of time talking about the good things that we were doing in the business office. For instance, I was always talking about cutting staff, how our fund balance was depleted, state aid was, going away. Looking back, I wish I would have, either it could even be a report format, monthly or quarterly, focus on some of the good things we were doing. We wrote grants when we were there. We got a records archiving grant. We were able to serve breakfast in the classroom. We were able to get a milk machine. Those things I didn't really share with people. It was just kind of things we did. And I wish I would have focused on sharing that more. I also wish I would have gotten out of the office more. I not only would have helped me strengthen my relationships, with others in the district, but I would be able to take in more of what was going on out in the building, and look at what the students were doing. I think I got bogged down too much in the day-to-day activities that I often forgot why I was really there, and that was really for the students. So I think that's probably one of the key things I would do more is get out of my office more.
Mhm. Okay, sounds good. All right, so any last questions before we wrap up? We have a rule here. We only run the webinar as long as we need to. So we don't necessarily have to go to an hour if we've covered the topic. But I do like to open it up to see if anybody had any questions or issues before we wrap up today. I guess this is not a question group. Well, I want to thank Joe and Nicole for sharing their insights and their expertise, and we look forward to your participation in future webinars. Just an FYI, this session was recorded, so if you know of colleagues that could not have made the session, let us know, and we will make a link available, and eventually these series of conversations will become an ongoing resource for both new and experienced school business administrators and other team members like district clerks and treasurers and I know we have an internal auditor participating as well, but resource for ASBO members. So once again, thank you very much for your participation, and we hope to see you at a future one of our conversations. Thanks again. Have a great day.